Hi and welcome back to part 4 of our video series. We are now at arrays, as you can see. Arrays are some sort of list. You could think of it as a list, basically. But we call them array because they are an array of data types, of variables, of certain values in a list, in an array. So it's basically a type of a variable. It's a data type. So a variable could be an array, so we can store an array in it. However, an array as itself holds then a certain number of values. So not only one, but a couple of values in that array, in that list. So it starts out with the first value, then there's the second value, so the first element, the second element, the third element, and so forth. As we are in information systems in IT, and computers do count beginning with a 0, the first element will then be addressed with a 0, the second element will be addressed with a 1, and so forth. So we start counting from 0. If we want to go to this third element, for example, we have to go to the array with the number 2, because then at the 2 there will be the third element, because 0, 1, 2, 3. All right, let's start out and just play around with arrays and get to know arrays. So let's first of all define an array. Let's start here. Let's call that array, because it's kind of a list, my list. Let's start like that. And to declare an array, we basically use brackets, columns, but not the standard columns as you used to, so not these ones. We use basically the more sharp ones, the more bracket likes. The one with not the round corners, but the sharp corners in a 90-degree angle, right? And if you're in a standard keyboard layout of a Windows machine, you basically find them at the same place as your standard columns, like on the 8 and 9 symbol, but without caps. Where you get to the normal bracket, you now have to use a ALT-GR, so alternative. I guess that means you have to use the alt symbol, but not the standard alt symbol, but the alt GR in German. Wait a second. Yeah, it's the same one in English. It stands for alternative graph or alternative graphic. So in the English keyboards, it's this symbol as well. And if you click that symbol and hold it while you press the bracket symbol, the column symbol, you get basically these columns you need. And with that, we can now start filling that out. And by a comma, basically we separate the items. So there's the first one, left of the comma, there's the second one, then there's the third one, and so forth. So by a comma, we separate them. And we can store every data type we want into them. So we could basically store, for example, a string like product. Or we could store that string with the other quotation marks as well. So it doesn't matter if we use the single quotation or the double quotation marks. Doesn't matter. And we can store that in here. By a comma, we go to the second element. That could now be an integer number, for example. So 42. Then the third one, that could be, for example, the 13.37. So a floating point. 13.37. And then we could maybe do a string again. Let's say, for example, euro. For euros. And in that list now, all of those 4 symbols are stored. At place 0, so the first element, there's a string called product. At place 1, so the second element is 42, an integer value. Then the floating point, 13.37, and then a string again, euro. To give you proof that everything worked, we can print that out again. So print my list, and let's view it. And you can see the list is printed here. Product, 42, 30 point, and so forth. All right. just to give you an idea how we access now only, so a list or an array now lists up several variables or several data types, several dates. And we can access now the full list, which we did with print my list. But what if we only want, there are 4 items stored in here, only the second one, so the 42, for example? Well, we can only access one part of that by not only printing my list, but now again using those brackets and now saying which element we want. 0 is the first one, 1 is the second one, 2 is the third one. So if we put in 0, we get product because it's at place 0 in that list. If we want the 42, the integer, so the second element, we go to place 1, and you can see there's the 42, and at 3, there's then the 13 point, at 2, this is 13.37, and at 3, there's the euro. And if we try to access the fourth one, that should be an error because it doesn't exist. As you can see, index error. He doesn't find the index. The tool doesn't find the index. So if we want to access the 42, it's 1, and we're there. All right. What's interesting is lists are super, or arrays are super useful because oftentimes we want to store a set of elements into one list. Then we can go through the list one by one and work ourselves through values. However, if you do think about business studies and stuff like that, we not only have one-dimensional data sets, so list a time series of data, for example, or prices we want to list. Sometimes with two-dimensional data, quite often actually, stored in matrices and stuff like that. How can we implement that into a tool like Python if we want to have two-dimensional data, or maybe three-dimensional data, or whatever? Well, it's not that hard, to be honest. We can do two-dimensional array as well. So a two-dimensional array matrix can be implemented as follows. So how do we do that? Well, let's call that now not my list because we have that. Let's call it now my array or my 2D array. Maybe we do it like that. And then we want to do that again. All right. So we start out with, okay, we want to have a list. Like, let's say, let's do A, B, C. Okay. So we do A, B, C. All right. Sorry. C. This is now our first list. And now we want a second list. Let's call that 1, 2, 3. And now we can see already where this is going. This is the first list. So let's exclude the spaces. We don't need them. First list, second list. But now, how do we put that together into one array? Well, why don't we do an array of arrays? So why isn't the first element in the array an array? Because we can put every data type into the array as we want to, and the second data type is an array as well. Then in this array, there are two arrays, or maybe a third one where we put then 4, 5, 6. So we have now a 3 by 3 array, right? So first line, ABC, second line, 1, 2, 3, third line, 4 by 4, 5, 6. This is basically a matrix we just implemented, two-dimensional array, a table, if you want to, by using arrays within arrays. So the data type within the array is an array. Did it work? Well, let's print it, right? Then we know it. So my 2D array, let's print that. And you can see we basically get the list back. So yeah, seems to have been working, but we don't see it as a table. Well, because it's still an array and we don't format it as we maybe want it to. But from the functionality wise, it's there, I guess. So cool, but what if we now only want to access deadline or deadline? Well, that's again possible. We can now access that again by my 2D array. And now, which line do we want to access? Let's say the first one, so at place 0. Then we should only get ABC, as it should be. All right, so we can output only single lines. Let's say the first one. First one. Output. Now we want to output only one value. Let's say the second value in the third row. All right, so we want to print again. So we want to have a my 2D array again. And now we want to access the second value in the third row. The third row, this is then 1, 2, 3. So 0, 1, 2, that's the third row. And within the third row, we want to access the second element, so 1. And if we should have a 5, and it's a 5. Because in the 1, 2, third, 1, 2 is the 5, and we get it. We can now change it, for example, into the 2. If we go here to 1, then it should be the second and the second. Or we can go to the third element here, and it should be the 3. And you can see we can manipulate as we intend to. So whatever we want to do here. Cool. So that's it for arrays. We can store a list of things we later on want to use, go through that array one by one, or access certain items. So let's go to the exercise. Okay, I want you to now create a 2D array in simple Python logic, where we have 3 vectors basically. Those are the 3 vectors. So first line, second line, third line if you want to. And from the second line, we want the first entry. All right. Let's do that. Hit pause. Solution will be in the next video.